3, 2, 1, go.
Hello, welcome to the Tech Meets Mental Health interview series. In this series, our host, Professor Skip Rizzo, will be engaging in dialogue with various experts in the digital mental health field across the course of the series. Today, Professor Rizzo will interview our amazing speaker, Dr. Jessica Stone. You may know her as one of the creators of the virtual sand tray. The Tech Meets Mental Health series is presented by Cognitive Leap. Cognitive Leap is a pioneer in the area of digital diagnostic and therapeutic systems designed to address ADHD and other cognitive and mental health conditions. Leveraging advances in virtual reality and using mobile and web-based applications, Cognitive Leap takes a human-centric, clinician-driven approach to create and deliver assessment and intervention tools. Our company has a strong research and development team with world-renowned experts who focus on neurology, cognition, psychology, engineering, and artificial intelligence. We are completing work on an FDA study for the approval of our virtual reality classroom diagnosing ADHD in children. Our expert in virtual reality and today's host is Professor Skip Rizzo. Skip Rizzo is a professor at USC and director of medical virtual reality. He serves as an advisor and chief science officer for Cognitive Leap, exploring methods to address attention deficit hyperactivity disorder in children. Dr. Jessica Stone is a licensed psychologist and registered play therapist who works in a private practice setting in Colorado. She's been a practitioner, professor, presenter, mentor, and author for over 25 years. Dr. Stone's interest in therapeutic digital tools has culminated in clinical mental health use and research for mental health, medical, and crisis settings. She's the co-creator of the Virtual Sand Trap app for iPad and the Virtual Sand Tray for virtual reality. Dr. Stone has numerous publications to date, including Integrating Technology into Modern Therapies, Gameplay, Play Therapy Theory and Perspectives, Play Therapy and Telemental Health, and Digital Play Therapy, in addition to numerous chapters in a variety of books. She is a member of the Odd Play and Digital Play Therapy Advisory Boards and serves as an affiliate of the East Carolina University College of Education Neurocognition Science Laboratory. During the interview, our participants who are joining us from the webinar can directly ask a question through the Q&A window, while participants from the YouTube live stream can also ask questions in the live chat. We will have around 10 minutes at the end to answer your questions. Let's turn it over to Professor Rizzo and Dr. Stone.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that introduction. And I just have to say, I've been looking forward to this podcast, this discussion for a long time since we booked it, because Jessica, I'm a real fan. I think what you're doing, it's something that's totally unique in the area of VR. And there are so many ways that this can add value to how we deal with issues, particularly with children. And this is an area, of course, that there's a lot of back and forth about how young kids can be before they can use VR. We'll touch on that a little bit later. And how do they use it? Now, certainly, we know kids use, there was a lot of Christmas presents given of the various headsets over the holidays with the Quest and so forth. And we know those aren't just for adults. So we know we have a lot of kids using this, even though you have the disclaimer about, I think mainly for liability purposes, not to, these things are designed for age 13 and up. But the research, with kids using VR, is pretty much, I think, documented that as long as we're not talking about long-term use, excessive use, that there can be a lot of value for children in clinical areas. And I think your work represents that. So just to kick it off, I remember when we first met, it was, 3 or 4 years ago, maybe 5. I think COVID messed up my time frame here. But you came to our lab with your husband and set up the sand tray. And at this point, I had a vague idea. I'd seen some videos, but Once I put on that headset and I was able to create things in this world, the light bulbs just went off on the power of what you've created. So just to kick off, can you tell me about where did this idea come from, and tell us a little bit about the application and how you got mixed up in this world of VR?
Right. So, well, thank you. It's an honor to be here, and I always love our conversation, Skip. So I think our biggest challenge, I'll speak for myself for sure, but our biggest challenge today is going to be keeping it concise, because I think we just have so much to talk about, and I just love that. So the very shortened version is that, as my intro said, I've been doing this for a long time as a clinical psychologist, and I'm also a registered play therapist. And so that gives me a specialty in working with children. And a time-honored, almost 100-year-old intervention is called Sandtray. It was started by Dr. Margaret Lowenfeld in response to the war and children who were having difficulty articulating the things that they had experienced. So she wanted to have an intervention, a tool in which children could express non-verbally, if that's what they needed, or verbally if they desired, what their experiences, their emotions, those kinds of things. There is something called the Rorschach that a lot of people are very familiar with. It's in movies, it's just part of our culture of a discussion. But basically, it's an ink blot test that people say, oh, it looks like a butterfly, it looks like a bat, it looks like, whatever it is they're going to put onto it. So this is a type of a projective technique where basically you're taking that inner material and experiences and emotions, and you're putting it out externally into a world that you're creating in the Sandtray. So fast forward, when the tsunami hit in Japan in 2011, a friend who is in Japan reached out and wanted and needed supplies to work with the people who were impacted in this crisis. And I said to my husband, who is a self-taught programmer, I said, how are they going to do Sandtray? That would be a very powerful tool for people who have been through the traumas. And again, fast forwarding, we ended up creating an iOS version, so a digital and virtual Sandtray, and that people then could take it anywhere they went, right? They could, instead of having to have a box with sand and a whole collection of little items that would go into the sand to create the world, this would be something that they could literally just carry in their hand from person to person, save trays, clean it. And then the mind goes crazy, right? Oh, hospitals. Oh, the crisis, other crisis situations, school environments, all kinds of environments where you could really use a tool that can be not only fun and engaging, but then also give psychosocial, psycho-emotional information. So then as I was going in this process and my mind is going in so many directions and all of that, I started thinking, what about the amazingly powerful experience of immersive virtual reality? And so now in the traditional, it's a person standing above a table that has a tray on it. So you are above it and looking down and creating this miniature world. In the digital, then you still have that experience of an other, right? Because you have the tablet or the phone in your hand, and then you are looking down to be able to create whatever it is. In VR, as we know, it is such an immersive experience that not only can I be up in God mode, and so up above as the other, just like we can in the other platforms, but then I can also be down in the tray, moving among the world that I've created, and therefore then interacting with it, which brings a whole additional level of processing, of experience, of emotion that can be placed into that. And I get so excited just even talking about it, because it's amazingly powerful. And I've watched clinically what that does for people.
Well, we know that that there's a growing appreciation of the importance of patient narrative and helping patients, whether it's in trauma or in other areas, to be able to tell their story. And particularly with children who sometimes don't have the words or don't want to tell their story to an adult. Yeah. They're giving them the power to represent that story. And then perhaps by the experience of creating it, They may talk about it more. I think it's just a tremendous, it's a well-matched use of VR, but it's just a tremendous opportunity to help kids to be able to open up about things that they would have difficulty speaking about otherwise, or even having the words. We take for granted as adults, we can describe our experience and tell our story a little bit, but sometimes kids don't have all those mechanisms. So what does it look like when a kid is in there? What do they get to select from? And tell us a little bit about the worlds that these kids can create.
Absolutely. So there are a couple facets of that. One is I want to make sure that I say that I've always had a focus on accessibility. And so as we go here along this journey and path of the different headsets and the different technologies that are coming out, that as many of the accessibility features that we can build in there, we want to, because we don't want any limitations as much as humanly possible and as much as technologically possible to keep people who could benefit from this kind of tool to be able to use it. So that's one piece in there. And then the other is that it's a I like to talk about it in terms of a multi-level, multi-dimensional depiction of the world, which is possible in technology in a way that's different than is in the traditional sense. So what I mean by that is everything from being able to change the skybox, which would be that background. You can have it be a sunny sky, it can be a cornfield, it can be a lagoon, it can be a beach, it can be dark and foreboding, you can be out in space, whatever needs to happen. And it really does change the mood of the tray. And then we get to the tray itself. You can dig down in the sand. You can build up the sand. When you dig down, 3 layers down, there is a liquid layer. So in a traditional sand tray setup, you would typically have a tray that would be painted blue on the bottom, so that when you dug down into the sand, you got to that liquid layer or to that water layer, and then it would look like it was water. So in this, you can either dig down and not have it get to the liquid, or it can be. Now, even that liquid layer can be changed. It can be poison, it can be lava, it can be blood, it can be all kinds of things down there as well. The sand itself can be painted with what in technological terms is textures. So you can have a big grass, you can have a cobblestone, lava, water, all kinds of things, even on the surface. So we're really able to set the mood in this multi-leveled, multi-layered way. Then we get to the actual items that are placed in there. And we have at this point, over 7,000 3D models that can be placed in there. And all of them can be resized, smaller, bigger, they can be rotated, they can be moved, they can be knocked over so that it looks like they're sleeping or they're dead, whatever the person wants to depict. If you want a family of elephants, you put a bunch of elephants in and make them bigger, smaller, turning toward each other, turned away from each other, isolated, whatever that might be. With special effects with fire and things that sparkle and just all kinds of special effects in there. Domes and half domes that can be put over things. Are they being contained? Are they being and like captured, or are they being secured and saved in a safe way? So there are all different kinds of things I can do with them. And then on top of it, we have ways to blow items up. So a sense of mastery and control, of your environment. And then we also have ways to change what we call a camera filter. So if you want it to look like it's snowing or raining, there's even an earthquake one, which somebody in California requested at one point. So all different ways. And then on top of that, because it is a clinical tool and it's intended to be used in a clinical setting with a professional or a paraprofessional who is trained, there are all sorts of confidentiality features. So there's sign-ins, there's saved trays that are only accessible to the person with the sign-in. So there have been a lot of details put in for this to be specifically a clinical tool.
This is music to my ears because it leverages all the power of VR. It just as a little sidestep, when people use the traditional physical sand tray, how many objects do they typically have at their disposal that they can give a child to build their story?
That's a really hard question to answer. But what I'll say is that the old adage when I was starting out was you knew how long somebody had been in the business by how many miniatures they had. So it's a collection that grows over time. There's a lot of conversation now in the traditional sense of you select, not collect. There are people who have what others would consider too barren a collection, and others who have ones that are too overwhelming and then just right. Like, so I think it really depends on who you are, what your theoretical orientation are. It depends on a lot of things go into that. But I would say it's a pretty safe bet to say the majority of people who do traditional sand therapies, because there are different types, sand tray, sand play, that's a whole nother conversation. But so we'll just say sand therapies don't have over 7,000.
No, I know. I was leading you to that point. I mean, it's like, the therapy in some sense, delivered by individual practitioners, is limited by the amount of resources, how many objects, and so on. Here with VR, you've created a giant catalog of content that is going to be, maximizes the individual nature of what a child can pick from. Probably have a challenge with a kid trying to figure out, with so many choices, but I'm sure you have these organized in a way.
Absolutely.
But you've created this massive library of content. Tell me about your development team that created it, because I know the answer to this.
I know you do. It's super fancy. It is me sitting in my room in my office at the house, and my husband Chris sitting on the couch, and us pretty much yelling back and forth saying, hey, have you thought about this feature? I think we should add this. Oh, I'd really like to find this particular model. Okay. And then he programs it, and I'm the idea person, and then he's the doer. So that's it. The customer service, the programming, the everything is all in-house between my desk and his couch.
That's just, I just love that aspect of it. I'm sure it might pose some challenges to the marriage at times,
Actually, we do really, really well with business. I don't know what that is. I think we're just really focused on the passion of this project, that it doesn't, I mean, a lot of people say that, you guys, if you had like a tiff or something, then is it difficult to keep going in the business part? And I don't know what it is, but we have a great talent, and I'm thankful for it.
Well, not to be flippant, but if you got divorced right now, you'd still have enough content to really move forward.
Okay, this is taking a turn.
But what I like about this is that this thing grows. And so you work with a kid, and the kid is looking for something to represent something very specific in their experience, and you don't have it. Well, a couple of days later, if you're nice to your husband, you can build that. And like,
that's how it's gone, because we started with 500. And it's just grown, because not only with me saying, because at first it's because the typical is you want to have houses, trees, people, animals, fences. Like there's some fundamentals that you want to have in there. And then I personally love dragons. So I want to have a really great collection of dragons in there.
That are animated.
Exactly, right? Because we didn't even talk about that a number of the items are animated, and you can make them do a number of different things. And particularly the customizable people. I just get so passionate about these, because the customizable people, we don't have them organized by gender. So it's just by age group. We have adults, seniors, teens, and children. And you can not only resize and do all those things I was talking about, but you can change their hair color and style, their skin color, and we have natural tones, and then we have like alien tones, but like green and purples and whatnot. So it can be representative, or it can be something different. And then you can change their clothing, the color, the style, everything. So mix and match as anyone feels is comfortable, how they want to depict themselves in that particular day, or somebody else in their life, whatever is needed in their story. So that is some really exciting stuff in there, but it's just grown based on me saying, oh, I'd love to do that. And then also Chris saying, oh, I found these really amazing things. I was thinking those would be useful. And then we also have our users who come to us and write to us and say, I have a client who would really benefit from this. And we have international people. So maybe the things that are common here in rural Colorado are not common in Australia, right?
Cultural relevance.
Absolutely. And that's the beauty of it, because it can grow in that way. And then the people can use it in the ways that speak to them. And that's such a powerful thing.
You know what, this resonates for me because when we did our first version of BraveMind, the PTSD exposure system for Iraq and Afghanistan and so on, you know, when we built the first version, for the next few years until we got funded to update and expand and so on, I would get calls and emails from clinicians saying, do you have a cave? Do you have this? Do you have that? I'd say, no, because that's a whole development effort. We're going to do that in the next round after we collect enough of this feedback. But here, you can rapid prototype based on the feedback you get from clinicians to better customize the experience for a specific child, and then still have that content for a child 10 in line in the queue for the next time. I find that
I've gotten feedback from clinicians to say, because I'm thinking of one particular who asked us for a seahorse. And so we found a seahorse. We don't create the models, we purchase them. So we found a seahorse and put it in, and I wrote to the clinician and I said, okay, in the next update, the seahorse is going to be there. So during their next session, they used it, and the child not only was excited to see the seahorse, but the clinician's feedback was that the child thought it was so amazing that what they asked for their need. The need was heard by the clinician, then followed through by the people who created this tool that she's using. And then there she has the seahorse. And it didn't just help with the creation of the tray, but it helped with that person's self-esteem, with their feeling of importance, being heard, asking for what they need. I mean, aren't those things that all of us work on and need all the time anyway? So how amazing that I just love the feedback from the clinician, because it just makes what we do that much more meaningful.
It's living. It's an ongoing living project, and it's going to continue to grow over time. Can you tell us a story about a child that has gone through maybe a traumatic experience and kind of world they created, and just maybe a client narrative or a mix of a couple?
Sure. So yes, taking out any identifiable anything for sure. But I'm thinking of one child in particular, and this is kind of a stereotypical, sadly stereotypical, I guess, scene that we hear clinically about a lot, and that we talk about in media and whatnot, is bullying. And so this particular person started out in God mode, so up above the tray and looking down on it, and put in a school and trees and a little river and grass and a playground. We have all sorts of playground equipment. So set up this whole scene of a schoolyard scenario, and then put in a number of children, and one of them being this client, and then the other being a collection of other children, and customize them to the way that they felt was appropriate, whatever that meant to them. And then in the animations that we were talking about earlier, so these customizable people also have emotions / actions that they do. So they can be laughing, crying, hands on the hip, angry, happy, whatever it might be. And so this client was able to cycle through and pick the particular emotions, and then come down from God mode down into the tray, walk along through this scene, and basically join this circle of children. And one, tell me the story of what this interaction was, because it was not pleasant for this child. And then two, we started to discover ways that this could be changed. What options did you have? You could have done X, Y, and Z. What might have been different if the other people involved had reacted differently? What would have happened if a teacher, because boom, we can add in a teacher or whoever they needed it to be. So this was very powerful, not only to tell me and show me what had happened, but then also to really, in a sense, role play. What could have been different? What could they have done? What could have other people have done? Whatever it might have been. And it was so immersive and interactive that it is a very different experience in your body, in your emotions, neurologically, in all ways, to actually be in it and experiencing that than to be sitting down and telling me about it, or even drawing a picture, which has its own power. But it's different. It's taking everything to another level.
This just seems so agnostic in terms of the theoretical orientation. I mean, Absolutely. It comes from a basic orientation of play therapy and what you're trying to do. But, I can see so many ways that you can bring in, whether it's narrative exposure therapy or prolonged exposure therapy, or just, role playing. It's just so many different things that can be brought to bear. I see this like as a universal tool to create experiences and help children to be able to express those experiences and somehow interact in a guided or healthy way by a clinician.
I've used it successfully with adults as well. And part of the beauty of that with adults is that it doesn't feel like you're playing with children's toys, which is something that with the traditional, some adults do beautifully with sand therapies, the traditional, like I don't want to discount that at all, but there are some people who say, you want me to do what? You want me to pick up the toys and you want me to put them in the sandbox? Like but so this is removing that and allowing them to also engage in creating a world. So I've used it with both, but yes, it's intentionally agnostic. I am trained in sand tray, not sand play, which again is a distinction most people, might not know about. So I speak in those terms because that's my expertise. I wouldn't pretend to be an expert in something else, but we have plenty of people from other theoretical foundations who utilize a virtual sand tray in the way that is meaningful to them and that they have been trained. We have been endorsed by the Lowenfeld Trust as retaining the fundamental tenets of sand tray in the process and with the program, which is a really big deal for me. It was one of the highlights of my career. Today is another one to be here talking with you. But that was really a highlight to be acknowledged because we've worked very hard to maintain those fundamental tenets, and to be acknowledged by them was a really big deal.
Well, I know we've talked in the past about how this could be adultified, how you could build things out that would help people that have suffered trauma from, a variety of sources, create with these kind of worlds and to be able to tell their story. And I've been doing a good bit lately on understanding more about this variant of exposure called narrative exposure therapy, which has been used with relative success. It's on the border of being an accepted variant, evidence-based approach and all, but it's been used a lot with refugees. I think it got kicked off with some of the use with Rwandan refugees. And now I just saw a case study with an Afghani going through it. And I just think there are tremendous opportunities here. And I just want to make this real quick point. I am now putting together a team of people from the Ukraine and Eastern Europe, as well as some folks in the US, to start exploring the development of applications that are going to address the inevitable tsunami of mental health issues coming from people that had to flee Ukraine, people that stayed and have seen horrific things. I mean, the battle is still going on. It's like survival is the primary thing, but we've got to be prepared and we've got to be able to deal with the number of children that have been displaced. So do think about the sand tray as something that might fit in with this, because we're working on a metaverse type experience for people coming together in an avatar form to share their story, much like Noah Robinson's work with the Help Club, but doing it with different contexts. It may represent Ukraine before the war or battlefield. We actually have a city scene with destruction and burning buildings and all the tropes that we know of now. We have a prototype of that. But do you see the sand tray as maybe being something that could be ready now to start to address the needs of children that have gone through experiences that no child needs to go through ever?
Absolutely.
It's criminal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to also put a little plug in there too for children in Russia too. They're
Absolutely.
They're not going through the same things.
Apolitical.
Yeah, but there is an impact in a lot of different directions. So hands down, that we are able to, as we've talked about before with other projects, we can change. We have gotten the patent for this product, and so we can change the skyboxes to be a particular 360 video scene that it needs to be. We can put in, as you said earlier, the different assets, the different models that would be representative of what they needed. And so to be able to depict, as we talked about with other situations earlier, to be able to depict the different scenes, who was where, when, what, the different effects that we have with we have explosions, we have fire, we have ability for the person to make something explode. So really the bottom line is we can put in there what needs to be put in there so that people can do the work they need to do to heal as much as they're going to be able to.
Yeah, fascinating. What's the response from traditionalists in the field? How do they look at what you're doing? Are you considered to be the crazy person trying to bring technology in when we want to get away from technology, or are you?
I'll say it's been a long road. Not as long as the one you've been on with VR and watching all that has happened in the decades, but certainly been a long road in talking about this. And the pandemic definitely gave things a big boost because we had to make so many changes so quickly. And especially in mental health and how services are provided and what do you actually do, when you're on screen with somebody instead. So there have been, and in the intro, they talked about my book, Digital Play Therapy. I finished that book before we really knew that this was happening, that COVID was happening. And then it published that June. So it was like perfect timing for people to at least say, oh, there's a foundation here. There's something to this. It's not just, oh, this fun thing, I'm going to just do this to try to take up time in a session. So on one hand, yes, I feel like in certain groups, I have been, and I still am a bit of a black sheep, but I am doing everything I can to create a very solid base for this fundamental work. And the importance of it, of the direction that society has gone. I don't even want to say is going, and to speak the language of our clients. The children who are alive now don't know life any differently than what is available now. I joke to people, like, I remember when we didn't have answering machines, right? The phone rang, you either answered and you didn't know who was on the other line. Like, right. And now we have abilities that I would never even have dreamed of as a child. And so to think that these kids now, these digital natives, and digital natives are up in their 20s now, early 30s even, really, and that they don't know life any differently, to come into a mental health setting and to have a practitioner who is open to hearing their interests. It's basically their culture, isn't it? It's the culture that they live in, and to be open to that, maybe engage with them, but at least have conversations is very powerful. There are so many things in mental health that we would not discredit or exclude from treatment. And if they brought it into the room and it was important to them, then we would work with them in those terms. And so to me, it's just logical that this would be that as well. And then the other layers on top of it really are that there are so many powerful things at our fingertips, literally, in utilizing these tools in therapeutic settings, that why wouldn't we?
Totally.
But we need to know, we need to be responsible, we need to be ethical, we need to know, we need good research. There's a lot of research out there that's not so good, as I know you know.
I was going to ask you, are people starting to pick up the mantle in this? I mean, this is so, it's like doing research, like you mentioned, with the Rorschach. I actually took a course in the Rorschach in graduate school and actually saw the value in that, even though it's the ugly stepchild in psychological assessment in some quarters, there's a certain amount of value in looking at the nature of how someone responds to an ink blot. Do they look at fine detail? Do they have consistently integrating the whole blot? People have proposed, Paul Satz, a great neuropsychologist, proposed using the Rorschach as a neuropsychological tool, not necessarily for the content, but the manner in which somebody approached a blot. He claimed that he had Einstein's Rorschach and said that Einstein gave one response for each card, and it was a whole response. And it was a reflection of how he saw all these details and merged them into a whole. So, so we see at some subjective level the value of these kinds of approaches, but it's hard to get a handle on it in traditional, a world, governed by traditional cognitive behavioral research and so on. How has that gone?
So we've had 3 studies that I'm aware of, that have been in contact with us and whatnot. And one of them was child life specialists in Australia through Deakin University. And then another one was, I don't want to get the name of the school wrong, but South Dakota, University of South Dakota. I think that's what it's called. And then the third one that's currently going on is through University of Alabama and Children's Hospital there. And that one's still ongoing. That is with pediatric burn patients. And their interest in it is, as I said earlier, is that not only is it fun and engaging, but it also provides a wealth of psychosocial, psycho-emotional information. And so for them, it was like a win-win. It was something that the kids would want to do, pain distraction and whatnot, because pediatric burn unit, obviously they're going through a lot, right? So those pieces of it, which is well documented, lots of great research on the pain distraction and the need for the lower need for medications and whatnot through procedures. So it's fantastic. But then on top of it, being able to get other information about themselves, how they're dealing with whatever trauma they've been through, how the family is functioning, all kinds of information in that too. So that one's ongoing and we don't have the results of that yet. It's a catch-22, right? Because I certainly don't want children to be burned.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I'm hopeful that it won't be too terribly long before we have the write-up on that one.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, certainly, I think funding agencies or even foundations need to look into supporting this kind of work and really see where we can build models for how it can be applied for different clinical conditions or in a transdiagnostic approach as well. Real quick, as we should move on to a couple other fun topics, but where does somebody get this if somebody wants to employ this in their clinic or do research with it?
So the iOS version is available through Apple, and it is a native app at this point intentionally, and we don't need to get into all the details here for that. If people want more info, they can certainly reach out to me, with every intention at some point of having it on Android as well. It just has to do with processors and features that we have and all that kind of stuff. So then we have the VR version, and we've had the VR version since we started in 2015, I believe, and then it was finished. It's an ongoing project forever, right? But it was a working product. How's that? As of 2016. And we don't have a home for it. So we're looking for a distribution library. We're looking, what I would really love, and if anybody's listening to this and has some either ideas or something, would really love to be part of a suite of programs that are available to people who are in children's hospitals or different organizations. We've been in talks with a great organization called 18 Loop, and they work with pediatric cancer. Right. So hopefully some things are moving, and that's going to be in the works, but that's really where I would like it to be, more so than say on Steam, where anybody can just, you know, this is intended to be a clinical tool. And so I've been kind of picky because this is really important to me. And so the things that are happening in it need to be done with great intention. So that's what I love.
After the podcast, I'll have a chat with you about an opportunity in that area that might be useful for you. Okay. All right. Let's move on. You know, I guess probably one question, just an easy one. What is it about VR that attracts people to come into this field? You know, we all know each other. We all know we're unique. we're different types of folks. But what's your take on the kind of person that's attracted to using VR and developing things and doing the research and so on?
I would say that the people I know who are attracted to VR in terms of development, in terms of exploration of the uses, of the possibilities, they're visionaries. They're looking ahead. They're bridging the ahead with the past. That they're understanding in a more holistic way that there are key fundamentals from the past and the present that can be bridged, and how do we do that in the future? How do we improve upon that? How can we, especially say in mental health, how can we continue to expand how we help people and how we understand what that even means? I'm a rabbit hole definition kind of person. And so for me, it's like, what's reality? What is help? What are needs? Like I go down these ridiculous existential paths of trying to even decide what those things mean or define them or discover or whatever that might be. Because if we can understand those fundamental components, then we can better translate those components into things in the future. And so I think the people I have met have been amazing visionaries. Certainly there are people who just want to make money, and they're, like all those kinds of things. But you filter down to the people who are on a day-to-day basis, doing the research, having the meetings, doing the development, all those kinds of things. That's what I see is in common.
Mm-hmm. I also noticed that you're a part of the Mhvr International Coalition, or were part of founding it. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how that might fit into this view? And
I'm so glad you brought it up, because I really would love anybody who is interested in this to become involved. So basically it started with a LinkedIn post that I didn't expect to really go anywhere. And I just put out there, I said, I want to connect with people who are working in the mental health virtual reality sphere in the space. And that's, I was like development, education, research, direct clinical use, like whatever that might be. And the response was kind of overwhelming, really. But my thought was, I'm in rural Colorado. Like I'm in a tiny little bubble where to find other clinicians to even connect with, never mind people who are doing other things like virtual reality, is very difficult. And so I go to these meetings and you're like, oh, my people, right? And then there are these pockets, like you said, we all kind of know each other and all of that. And so so I thought there has to be more. There have to be more people out there who are feeling similarly, that they're feeling isolated and fragmented. And so that's my purpose of putting it out there. And then it just grew into something much bigger. So we have started to form about 3-4 months ago, and we've had a couple of meetings in Engage VR, like all of us in our headsets meeting in there and putting stickies on whiteboards and starting to organize things. And now we have a group of people in each of those 4 sections I listed who are preparing to write white papers so that we can, and 1, connect people together, 2, to write white papers. And I'm hoping, just like Stanford did years ago for digital health, things to have ethical and standards for clinical use of these tools. So I would love for anybody who wants to be involved. You guys will be putting up all my contact info. Find me on LinkedIn, email me. I don't care. Just get a hold of me. The meetings are the first Wednesday of every month.
Great. I had started something like that back in '97 as an email listserv called VR Psych. And it still exists today. We don't really post that much on email. We have a Facebook page and all that. Right. But I would love for you to post a little something on VR Psych on our Facebook page, so that the folks, and these are a lot of people that, were early on in the field that are still with it. And they didn't get chased away. They didn't die off. They're still in the thick of it. And I think they would have a strong interest, as do I.
Well, and what a wealth of information.
Yeah. That's the beauty of this field. You got people who've been around for a long time, but you've got young, fresh, interesting people with new ideas, and it makes the field vibrant. It's just constantly growing and morphing and evolving. So I'm so excited about where things are at now. What about a question I ask everybody, since we got to stop for questions in a few minutes. I always want to get this one in. But if you had unlimited funding in 2 years to build anything you wanted, how would you focus your efforts?
Focusing my efforts would be the biggest thing, because I have so many ideas, so many things that I want to do, so many different directions in the mental health field that I think would, everything from direct clinical use to educating up and coming therapists, to particular subgroup. Like, it's just, I have so many ideas. So I think that if I had unlimited resources and I had 2 years, the first and foremost thing I would do is to put a team together of people who could help me develop in terms of the content, like the ideas, the directions, whatnot, and then actually develop in terms of technology, these ideas that I have and that other people have on that team. And that's really what I would love to do. And then secondly, in not in hierarchy, but another thought is to continue to increase accessibility. Both in terms of people being able to have headsets and utilize the programs, and then also in terms of any limitations they might have, mobility, sight, hearing, any of those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. And part of what I want to do, even on a smaller scale, is there are a couple of phenomenal offices out there, particularly who work with children. And I would love to even have a team do some 360 video and then put in interactives in there, so that, like, there's one in Tennessee called Nurture House, Paris Goodyear Brown leads, and to be able to have, she has all these different rooms, different sensory rooms and experiences in this house that is their treatment center, to be able to have 360 video of that and have people from all over the world be able to experience what she has created. There's another person, Angela Cavett, who has done the same in North Dakota. Like, just some amazing things that really aren't that far-fetched, but that's a couple of ideas that I would like to do.
Yeah, it's great. I resonate definitely with the training element of providing better training for people on how to use VR effectively. This is a thin spot. I mean, I get probably 3 or 4 calls a day about where can I get trained in using this or that, and I think it's time for that. So also, your point about accessibility, I think, is important. And you mentioned blind children. And that's an area where, you think, well, how can VR be used? Well, with really good immersive audio, children can build soundscapes that are really quite impressive and emotionally evocative. And, Jaime Sanchez down in Chile doing his work in the 90s with children with severe visual impairments, where I built a game called Audio Doom. And it was all sound cues that kids would navigate through, and they'd hear monsters, running up, the hallway or a cave, whatever. And he found that when he tested kids after and had them create the layout of the Doom environment, that they had created sound using Legos, that the representations of the space were quite accurate to the soundscape. And so there was just a tremendous thing here. So anything that can address that using really good audio or tactile stimuli, I think would be a real advance for how we can extract the power of these simulations for a useful clinical purpose for somebody who has other abilities in their sensory domain. I think we're getting down to the end here. So why don't we start our Q&A, so that if we have a few folks with questions, they can hammer us and try to trip us up a little bit here.
Great. Okay, well, thank you so much, Dr. Stone and Dr. Rizzo. Really appreciate everything that you've shared today. This has been truly amazing. I'm just wondering whether anyone has any particular questions that they would like to ask right now. If you'd like to submit those through the Q&A window, that would be great, or through the chat if you're on YouTube. So if we have anything coming through, that would be wonderful. But in the meantime, I guess I'd love to ask the question in terms of, what both Dr. Rizzo and Dr. Stone, what are some of the, what are the most exciting up-and-coming virtual reality applications in therapy that you're seeing right now that you're very excited about? Let's start, Dr. Stone, would you?
Specifically for mental health,
Yes.
There's so much work in meditation and relaxation, and I think there are some fantastic programs in there. I know Sarah Tico has done phenomenal work with Deep, and I've been able to try that out. So that is very exciting. In other realms, I don't know. I mean, that's part of the reason I put the plea out on LinkedIn, is like, let's connect, because besides the relaxation and meditation, I don't know of a lot of other things that are going on. So I know that there are a couple of companies that I have seen on LinkedIn who are talking about. One of them, I think, is Deepwell. There's a person who I emailed you about, Skip, that I was like, I want to hear more. I sat in on Purdue University's lecture a few days ago that had Stephen Reed from Microsoft, and he was talking more about like pedagogy and whatnot, but he really spoke a lot about different programs and the therapeutic and emotional aspects that a bunch of programs use. So there's rumblings all around, but I'll leave it to Skip in case he has one on the tip of his tongue that he's excited about.
Chelsea, I put you in a category with some of the people that have done really innovative things that have created new directions for how we apply this. Certainly, no one's done anything like Sandtray in the past. That was your unique, special thing, and it's so well informed. And I put it in a category with like work that Mel Slater is doing with, body doubles and, inhabiting another body and interacting with representation of yourself and looking at depression to build self-compassion. And I mean, that to me is epic work. I also look at, Dan Freeman in Oxford with his efforts to try to incrementally push more therapy into more individualized, still supervised by a clinician, but more individualized approaches, regardless of what the therapy involves, and to study that. I look at, Jung and Noah Robinson with his Help Club application, which I think opens up a door for peer support access to create conversations among people in a metaverse, like, well, I hate to use that term, but in shared virtual worlds that are avatar based. And, I could just keep going through the list of folks that are doing novel, unique things, leveraging what we learned, in phase one of this, primarily focused on anxiety disorders, pain management, physical and cognitive therapy, or rehabilitation, and so on. I'm also, not to throw a shameless plug here, but I'm also very excited about our work with Cognitive Leap, where they've essentially taken a project that, I developed at USC many years ago, a virtual classroom for ADHD, or for attention process assessment, and now really brought it into the modern era. And the potential power to be able to create, clinical assessment tools, not just treatment, I think it's just opening up now that we can deliver these things in a more cost-effective fashion. We can leverage AI, better data analytics, and we can do it on a standalone headset and maximize access. So I think there's, it's a vibrant field of energy informed by science and driven by availability of, relatively low cost and growing high fidelity technology applications.
What I want to also say about the project that Cognitive Leap is working on, and I was thinking about that more like assessment than I was originally in the question. I was thinking direct mental health, like intervention. The process that families go through to have more information about what their child is experiencing or is having difficulty with, or something like that, in terms of, say, ADHD. The traditional process is quite lengthy. You have a referral, you have a lot of testing, you have to wait however long it takes, because psych testing takes quite some time to write up. So then you get that feedback, and then you get sent in a number of different directions for different interventions and different things. What I understand anyway about what's coming is it cuts down so much of that. So it's not just cost effective, but it's a way for people to get the information much more quickly so that they then can help their child. And that is amazingly powerful. So yes, that's some exciting stuff coming.
Yeah.
Well, I would say also that it does it in that immersive way, so the child actually can enjoy going through the testing, through the assessment, as opposed to it being boring and rigorous. So,
yeah.
But, well, Dr. Stone, you had mentioned before, I think in terms of some of the hurdles maybe that you've encountered with, like, the virtual sand tray in gaining widespread adoption, one being around distribution, for example, the other around maybe a little technophobia, or I'm not quite sure what you would call that. What other hurdles have you seen out there? Are those the main ones, or is it really about how do you get all of these people together, like through your coalition that you've started, sharing information and gaining, that respect and credibility and usage that you need in order to move this forward, so that everybody can benefit from it?
I think that historically, and I've said in some other environments, that I was reading a book from 1935, and the writer said that psychology is slow to change. And here we are almost 100 years later, and I'm going to say the same thing. So as a field. And so I started, my rabbit holes of trying to figure things out. I started to think about, why is that? And one of the fundamental things I think it is because therapists, we're here to help people, and we don't want to do any harm. We want to make sure that we are providing the environment, the relationship, the interventions, the guidance, the path, the whatever it might be, that is going to most help our clients or our patients. And so in that, I think there is a lot of concern about things that are new, because the new brings unknown, and the unknown means that we may or may not be doing the right thing for our clients. And so in any approach that we're taking with clinicians, I think it's important for us to keep that in mind and to make sure that we are doing everything we can to speak to that so that they can feel confident in the experience, in the knowledge within themselves, and then within the sessions to be able to provide these types of services, including things like VR and other digital tools, anything under the XR heading, really.
Well, thank you so much. I think that's the end of our Q&A right now. But I wanted to thank you so much for joining us today and for joining this event in the Tech Meets Mental Health series. I hope the participants who have joined today have learned from our amazing speaker today. Dr. Stone, this has been extremely fascinating, and I want to thank you again for joining us, and thank you again to our host, Dr. Rizzo. For our audience, the video recordings of this event will be available on our YouTube channel. We'd ask that you please feel free to share it with anyone who might be interested in the topic. And we look forward to seeing you again at our next event, and hope you have the rest of your day is wonderful. Thank you.
See you, Jessica. See you, Cher.
Thank you.
Bye.